They say blood is thicker than water. But what happens when your own son looks you in the eye and tells you to pack your bags? When the home you built with your bare hands suddenly isn't yours anymore? When you discover that the signature on legal documents transferring your $4.4 million property wasn't actually yours? My name is Evelyn Maddox. I'm 74 years old, and this is the story of how my son and his wife stole everything from me, and how I took it all back. Before we continue with this incredible story, hit that like button, subscribe for more stories of justice served cold, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I want to know if this kind of family betrayal happens everywhere. But first, let me take you back to where it all began, Galveston, Texas, 1983. The salt air carried the scent of Gulf shrimp and possibility. My husband Victor and I had just broken ground on what would become our forever home. Victor was a shipbuilder with hands that could shape steel into dreams. I was a seamstress who understood that the strongest fabric was woven with patience and love. We built that house board by board, nail by nail. Victor would come home covered in sawdust, his work boots heavy on the porch we'd installed just the week before. I'd have sweet tea waiting and fabric samples spread across our makeshift kitchen table. Every room told a story. Every corner held a memory we were creating together. The living room had these wide windows that caught the morning light just right. I hung floral curtains, soft roses on cream fabric that danced in the Gulf breeze. Our bedroom faced east, so we could watch the sun rise over the water. Victor insisted on a workshop in the back where he'd tinker with boat engines and I'd set up my sewing machine. When our son Lucas was born in 1984, that house became complete. I remember rocking him to sleep in the nursery Victor had painted pale yellow because we wanted to be surprised. The floorboards creaked in a rhythm that became our family's lullaby. Lucas took his first steps across the hardwood in the hallway. He learned to read curled up in my recliner, the one with the soft brown leather that molded perfectly to hold us both. For 41 years, that house was our sanctuary. Victor passed away 8 years ago, leaving me with memories soaked into every wall and the mortgage paid off in full. The property, prime waterfront real estate, had appreciated to $4.4 million. But to me, it was priceless. Lucas grew up to be an IT project manager. Steady work, good salary, seemed to have his head on straight. He married Camilla 5 years ago. She's 39, works as a corporate strategist, and has this way of making everything sound like a business proposal. Even her laugh sounds calculated. I tried to like her. Really, I did. When Lucas first brought her home, I made my famous pot roast, the one that fills the whole house with the smell of rosemary and comfort. Camilla picked at it, mentioned she was mostly plant-based now, and suggested I might benefit from some dietary modernization. Red flag number 1. But love makes you blind, doesn't it? Not romantic love, maternal love, the kind that makes you excuse anything if it means keeping your child close. The trouble started 18 months ago when Lucas and Camilla announced they were moving in with me. "Just temporarily, Mom," Lucas said, his eyes not quite meeting mine. "The housing market is crazy right now. We're saving for something really special." Camilla jumped in with her practiced smile. "It'll be so nice for you to have company, Evelyn. This big house must get lonely." I wasn't lonely. I had my routines, my garden, my sewing circle on Thursdays. But how do you tell your son you prefer your solitude to his company? So I said yes. The first week was fine. They kept to themselves mostly, Camilla working from her laptop at the kitchen table, Lucas disappearing into his childhood room that still had his high school football trophies on the shelf. I cooked dinner every night, just like I had when Lucas was growing up. Camilla would eat small portions and suggest healthier alternatives, but she was polite about it. Week 2, things started changing. I came home from grocery shopping to find my floral curtains wadded up in a laundry basket. In their place hung these sterile linen panels, beige and lifeless as hospital walls. "I hope you don't mind," Camilla said when I asked. "I thought the space needed a more contemporary feel. These let in so much more light." But they let in too much light. The morning sun blazed through, harsh and unforgiving. Those floral curtains had filtered the light into something gentle, something that eased me into each new day. Next went my recliner. I came home from my Thursday sewing circle to find it gone. "Where's my chair?" I asked Lucas.
He was washing dishes, his back to me. Camilla thought it might be better in the garage. It was kind of dominating the living room. Dominating? That chair had held me through Victor's final illness, through countless evenings of reading and reflection. It knew the exact curve of my spine, the weight of my grief, the shape of my healing. Now it sat in the garage like an unwanted relic, gathering dust between paint cans and garden tools. "We want to create a more cohesive design aesthetic," Camilla explained when I confronted her. She was rearranging my bookshelf, moving Victor's maritime histories to make room for her self-help books. "This is really for the best, Evelyn. You'll see." But I didn't see. What I saw was my life being erased piece by piece. The guidelines for shared spaces appeared in week 3, a typed document, laminated and posted on the refrigerator like some corporate memo. Quiet hours from 9 p.m. to 7 a.m. Kitchen cleanup to be completed immediately after each use. No personal items in common areas. I know it seems formal, but structure helps everyone feel comfortable in shared living situations. Shared living situations? That's what she called my home? My 40 decades of memories reduced to a shared living situation? Lucas said nothing. His silence was deafening. When I'd look at him across the dinner table, the table Victor had built from reclaimed ship timber, I'd search his face for the little boy who used to help me bake cookies on rainy afternoons. But that boy was gone, replaced by this hollow-eyed man who nodded along to his wife's redesign of his childhood. The criticism started subtly. Comments about my cooking being too heavy for their lifestyle. Suggestions that my morning routine of coffee and crosswords on the back porch might be disruptive to those trying to work from home. Questions about whether I really needed to use the washing machine so frequently. I felt like a guest in my own house. Worse than a guest. At least guests are welcomed. I felt like an inconvenience being tolerated. The breaking point came on a Tuesday in September. The air still held summer's heat, but you could smell autumn creeping in with the evening tide. I was in my bedroom, the only space that still felt like mine, when I heard Camille on the phone in the hallway. Her voice was low, but not low enough. "We need to move forward before she changes her mind," she was saying. "Yes, I understand the timeline is aggressive, but we can't risk any complications." No, she hasn't been asking questions yet, but that could change. The emotional manipulation angle is already established. We've documented several instances of unstable behavior. My blood turned to ice water. Unstable behavior? What unstable behavior? The financial power of attorney is the crucial piece. Once that's in place, we can accelerate the trust restructuring. Lucas is on board, though he gets squeamish about the details. I pressed myself against the door, straining to hear every word. 4.4 million is nothing to sneeze at, especially with the consulting contracts I've lined up. No, she's old, but not stupid. We have to be careful about the paper trail. 4.4 million. They were talking about my house, my life's work, my legacy. I backed away from the door, my hands shaking. In 41 years of marriage, Victor and I never kept secrets from each other. Honesty was the foundation everything else was built on. But here in my own home, conspiracies were being hatched in my hallway. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in the bed I'd shared with Victor, listening to the familiar sounds of the house settling, and felt like a stranger in my own skin. Every creak of the floorboards seemed ominous. Every whisper of wind through the windows sounded like secrets being shared. The next morning, I did something I never did before. I called my bank. "I'd like to check on my accounts," I told the customer service representative. All of them. What I learned made my knees go weak. My primary checking account showed 3 large withdrawals I didn't make. $20,000, $15,000, $30,000, all authorized by something called Maddox Holdings, LLC, a company I'd never heard of. My savings account had been restructured into some kind of managed investment portfolio without my knowledge. The investment account Victor and I had built over 30 years showed a balance that was significantly lower than it should have been. And my house, my beautiful, memory-soaked house, was no longer in my name. According to the county records, the deed had been transferred to Maddox Holdings, LLC 6 weeks earlier. The signature on the transfer documents looked like mine, but I'd never signed any such papers.
I hung up the phone and sat in the kitchen, where Victor had drunk his morning coffee for 23 years. The new linen curtains let in harsh afternoon light that exposed every wrinkle in my hands, every line in my face. I looked old. I felt older. But I wasn't dead yet. Here's what I want to know, and be honest in the comments. Have you ever had family members you trusted completely betray you financially? Because what happened next will show you exactly why you should never, ever give anyone unlimited access to your finances, even if they're your own flesh and blood. That evening, I confronted Lucas directly. Camilla was out at some networking event, so it was just us, mother and son, the way it used to be when he'd come to me with scraped knees and broken hearts. "Lucas," I said, sitting across from him at the kitchen table, "we need to talk about Maddox Holdings, LLC. His face went white, absolutely white. For a moment, he looked like the little boy who'd gotten caught stealing cookies before dinner. "Mom, I can explain." "Explain what?" "Explain how my house got transferred to a company I've never heard of. Explain how tens of thousands of dollars have been withdrawn from my accounts without my permission. Explain how my own son is stealing from me." He ran his hands through his hair, a gesture I remembered from his teenage years when he tried to talk his way out of trouble. "It's not stealing, Mom. It's estate planning. Camilla says if we don't get your assets properly structured, the government will take huge chunks when you pass. This protects your legacy." My legacy? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Lucas, I am 74 years old, not 94. I'm not planning to die anytime soon, and even if I were, don't you think I should be involved in decisions about my legacy? Of course, but Camilla has experience with this stuff. She knows the legal loopholes, the tax implications. She's trying to help. Help herself, you mean? His jaw tightened. That's not fair. Fair? I stood up, my chair scraping against the hardwood Victor had installed himself. What's not fair is finding out my son has been plotting behind my back. What's not fair is being made to feel like an intruder in the house I built with my own hands. Nobody's plotting, Mom. You're being dramatic. Dramatic. The same word Camilla used to dismiss anything she couldn't control. Show me the papers, I said. What papers? The papers I supposedly signed transferring my house to this LLC. I want to see my signature. He looked everywhere but at my face. I don't have them here. They're at Camilla's office. Then get them. Mom, please, can we just get them, Lucas? Or I'm calling a lawyer tomorrow. That's when his mask finally slipped. The apologetic son disappeared, replaced by someone I didn't recognize. You want to call a lawyer? Fine. But you should know that Camilla has documentation of your concerning behaviors. The confusion about dates, the repetitive questions, the emotional outbursts. A legal challenge might not go the way you think it will. My mouth fell open. Concerning behaviors? What are you talking about? The other day, you asked me 3 times what day it was. Last week, you couldn't remember where you put your car keys. And the crying Jags? I asked what day it was because I've been in the garden all morning and lost track of time. I couldn't find my keys because someone moved them from the hook by the door. And I've cried exactly twice since your father died, once on his birthday and once on our anniversary. If that makes me mentally incompetent, then half the widows in Texas need guardians. But I could see it in his eyes. They'd been building a case. Every moment of normal human forgetfulness, every expression of grief, every sign of aging, it had all been twisted into evidence of my declining mental capacity. Lucas, I said quietly, I raised you better than this. For a moment, just a moment, I saw a flicker of the boy I'd loved, the one who used to crawl into bed with Victor and me during thunderstorms, the one who'd bring me dandelions from the yard like they were roses. But then Camilla's key turned in the front door, and the moment passed. We're doing this for your own good, Mom, he said, even if you can't see it right now. The next 3 weeks were a special kind of hell. Every day brought new guidelines, new restrictions on my life in my own home. I wasn't allowed to receive mail directly. Camilla needed to screen it for scams. My credit cards were temporarily suspended from my protection. Even my weekly grocery shopping had to be approved and supervised. They were erasing me systematically, and Lucas watched it happen without saying a word. The final blow came on a Thursday morning in October. The air was crisp with the first real taste of autumn, and the leaves on the oak tree Victor planted for Lucas's first birthday were starting to turn gold. I woke up to find a locksmith changing the front door locks. "Excuse me," I called from the porch, still in my robe and slippers. "What are you doing?" The locksmith looked uncomfortable. "Man, I'm just following the work order."
New locks for the primary residence. Primary residence. Not the woman who'd lived there for 41 years. Camilla appeared behind me, already dressed for work in one of her sharp business suits. Evelyn, we need to talk. She led me to the kitchen table, my kitchen table, and sat across from me like we were having a business meeting. This is difficult, she began, but Lucas and I feel it would be best if you took some time to reassess your living situation. I stared at her. Reassess my living situation? This is my house. Actually, it's not. Not legally, and frankly, the current arrangement isn't working for anyone. You're clearly struggling with the adjustment to shared living arrangements, and that's creating tension for everyone. I'm struggling? You moved into my house and started rearranging my life without asking. See, this is exactly what I'm talking about. The hostility, the paranoia. It's not healthy for you, and it's not sustainable for us. The locksmith finished his work and handed Camilla the new keys. 2 sets. None for me. I found you a nice place at the Seaside Inn. It's temporary, just until we can find something more permanent that suits your needs. The Seaside Inn, a roadside motel that rented rooms by the week to drifters and people down on their luck. You're evicting me from my own home? We're giving you space to think clearly, away from the stress of shared living arrangements. Lucas appeared in the doorway, but he wouldn't meet my eyes. Lucas, I said, my voice breaking, please. He shifted his weight from foot to foot like a guilty child. Mom, it's just temporary until you're feeling more stable. Stable. There was that word again. I want to see those papers, the ones with my signature, right now. Camilla opened her leather portfolio and pulled out a folder. Inside were photocopies of documents bearing my signature, or something that looked like my signature. Power of attorney, deed transfer, bank authorization forms. I studied them carefully. The signature looked right at first glance, but something was off. The loop on the E was too small. The final X in Maddox slanted the wrong way. These weren't my signatures. I said, these are forgeries. That's a very serious accusation, Camilla replied smoothly, especially coming from someone who's been showing signs of memory issues. Memory issues. The gaslighting was complete. I'm not going anywhere, I said, standing up. This is my house. Actually, Camilla pulled out another document. This is an eviction notice. You have 24 hours to remove your personal belongings. After that, anything remaining will be disposed of. I looked at Lucas, this stranger who used to be my son. How can you let her do this to me? His voice was barely a whisper. Mom, please don't make this harder than it has to be. Harder than it had to be? They were stealing my life, and I was making it hard for them? I went to my bedroom and packed a suitcase with shaking hands. 41 years of life, and it fit into one bag. I took my wedding photo, Victor's watch, my mother's jewelry, and enough clothes for a few days. That's all I could carry. At the front door, my front door with its new locks, I turned back one more time. This isn't over, I told them. Camilla smiled, her corporate smile. Have a good day, Evelyn. The Seaside Inn smelled like cigarettes and disinfectant. The room was small and dark, with curtains that had seen better decades, and a bed that sagged in the middle. Through the thin walls, I could hear a baby crying and a television blaring. I sat on that sad bed and cried for the first time since Victor's funeral. Not the gentle tears of grief, but the harsh sobs of rage and betrayal. They'd taken everything. Not just my house, but my dignity, my autonomy, my sense of self. But then I remembered something Victor used to say when his ships encountered storms. The sea might knock you down, but it can't keep you down unless you let it. I dried my eyes and picked up the motel phone. Now here's where it gets interesting, and I need you to pay attention because this might save your life someday. If you're elderly or you know elderly people, you need to understand the warning signs of elder financial abuse. Drop a comment and tell me, do you think adult children have the right to make financial decisions for their parents without consent, even if they think it's for their own good? Because what I discovered next will shock you. The law office of Taryn Ross was nothing like the corporate firms Camilla probably used. It was in a converted Victorian house near downtown Galveston, with creaky floors and walls lined with law books that looked actually read, not just decorative. Taryn Ross was younger than I expected, maybe 35, with short dark hair and eyes that missed nothing. She listened to my story without interruption, taking notes on a yellow legal pad. Mrs. Maddox, what you've described is textbook elder financial abuse. The isolation, the gaslighting, the forged documents. I've seen this pattern too many times. Can you help me? I can try, but I need you to understand that this won't be easy. They've been planning this for months, maybe longer. They have documentation that make you look incompetent. They've isolated you from your support systems, and they're betting on you being too embarrassed or defeated to fight back. I'm not defeated. She smiled for the first time. Good, because we're going to need every ounce of fight you have. The first step was getting copies of all the financial documents. Taryn had contacts at the banks who could provide transaction records going back 2 years. What we found was damning. The withdrawals from my accounts hadn't just been the large ones I'd noticed. There had been dozens of smaller transactions, all authorized by Maddox Holdings, LLC. Death by 1,000 cuts. But the real smoking gun was something called Pinnacle Consulting Solutions. According to the bank records, my investment account had been paying Pinnacle Consulting $1,500 a month for portfolio management services for the past 8 months. Have you ever heard of Pinnacle Consulting? Taryn asked. Never. That's because it doesn't exist. Well, it exists on paper, but it's a shell company. And guess who the registered owner is? My stomach dropped. Camilla. Bingo. She's been funneling your money into her own pocket, then using it to pay for what I'm guessing is a pretty expensive lifestyle. The total amount stolen was staggering. $230,000, siphoned out of accounts that Victor and I had built over 3 decades of careful saving. But the house was the real prize. Prime waterfront property in Galveston, worth $4.4 million and rising. Once they had full control, they could sell it, take the money, and disappear. The good news, Taryn said, is that forgery is a felony. The bad news is that your son is involved, and I know that's going to be painful. He made his choice, I said, surprised by the steel in my own voice.
There's something else you should know. I did some digging into Camilla's background. This isn't her first time at this rodeo. She handed me a folder containing newspaper clippings and court documents. Camilla's previous marriage had ended in a bitter divorce when her first husband accused her of financial manipulation. The case had been settled out of court, but the pattern was there. She's a professional, Taryn said. This is what she does. That night, back in my depressing motel room, I called the one person I should have called years ago, my brother Dean. Dean and I had a falling out 20 years ago over something so stupid I could barely remember what it was about. Pride had kept us apart all these years, but pride was a luxury I could no longer afford. "Dean?" I said when he answered his phone in Arkansas. "It's Evelyn." There was a long pause. "Well, I'll be damned. Evie? Is that really you?" Nobody had called me Evie in 20 years. "Dean, I need help. I'm in trouble." "What kind of trouble?" I told him everything. When I finished, the silence stretched so long I thought he'd hung up. "Dean, are you there?" "I'm here, Evie. I'm just trying not to drive to Texas and beat the hell out of that boy at yours." Dean Henderson was 66 years old, a Vietnam veteran who'd spent the last 20 years living off the grid in the Arkansas mountains. He built furniture from trees he cut down himself and had hands like leather from decades of honest work. "I'll be there tomorrow," he said. "Dean, you don't have to." "Family is family, Evie, even when family screws up, especially then." He arrived at the Seaside Inn driving a pickup truck that was older than Lucas, with Arkansas plates and a toolbox in the back that looked like it had seen some battles. I hadn't seen Dean in person in 20 years, but he looked exactly like I expected. Gray beard, weathered face, eyes that had seen too much but still held kindness. He took one look at my motel room and shook his head. "This is where they put you? Jesus, Evie. It's temporary. Everything's temporary. That don't make it right." We drove to the house, my house, so Dean could see what we were dealing with. The new locks gleamed in the afternoon sun. Camilla's car was in the driveway, but Lucas was probably at work. Dean walked the perimeter like he was scouting enemy territory. "Nice place. You and Victor did good." Victor always said you had the better eye for construction. Victor was a good man. He wouldn't stand for this. We sat in Dean's truck, looking at the house where I'd raised my son, and Dean asked the question I'd been avoiding. "What do you want to happen here, Evie? You want your house back? You want them punished? You want justice, because those might not be the same thing." "I want my life back." "That might not be possible. Not the same life, anyway." "Then I want a new one, on my terms." Now you're talking. The legal process moved faster than I expected. Taryn filed for an emergency injunction to freeze all assets pending investigation. She also filed criminal complaints for forgery, elder abuse, and fraud. The day the police arrived at my house with search warrants was the most satisfying moment I had in months. I wasn't there. Taryn advised against it, but Dean was. He parked across the street and watched as they carried out boxes of documents, computers, and files.
Camilla came out screaming about harassment and illegal search and seizure, Dean told me later. But that boy of yours just stood there looking like he wanted to disappear. The evidence was overwhelming. Forensic analysis of the signatures confirmed what I already knew. They were forgeries, and not particularly good ones. The Pinnacle Consulting scam was exposed, with a paper trail that led directly to Camilla's personal accounts. But the real bombshell came when investigators dug deeper into Lucas's activities. Security footage from ATM machines showed him making withdrawals from what was supposed to be a restricted emergency account. Dozens of transactions over 6 months, always in amounts just under the federal reporting threshold. And then there was the life insurance policy. Victor had carried a $1 million life insurance policy that transferred to me when he died. I'd never changed the beneficiary because, well, when you're 74 and widowed, who else would you leave it to but your son? Except someone had changed it. 6 months ago, an amendment had been filed changing the beneficiary from Evelyn Maddox to Lucas Maddox, sole beneficiary. I'd never signed that amendment. This is the part that's going to make you angry. And I want you to tell me in the comments if you think I was too soft on them or if you would have gone further. Because when it came time for justice, I had to decide between revenge and recovery. The choice I made might surprise you. The court hearing was scheduled for a Tuesday morning in November. The air was crisp and clean, with that sharp clarity that only comes with the first real cold front of the season. I wore my best dress, navy blue with small pearl buttons that Victor had bought me for our 30th anniversary. Taryn had advised looking dignified but not wealthy, whatever that meant. I just wanted to look like the woman I'd always been, not the victim they'd tried to make me. Camilla arrived with a team of lawyers that probably cost more per hour than most people made in a week. She looked confident, polished, completely in control. Lucas looked like he hadn't slept in weeks. The judge was a woman about my age, with gray hair and no-nonsense glasses. She reviewed the evidence with the thoroughness of someone who'd seen too many cases like this one. The forged signatures were obvious once you knew what to look for. The financial paper trail was clear as daylight. The shell company scheme was textbook fraud. But what sealed their fate was something I hadn't expected. When Lucas took the stand to testify on his own behalf, he fell apart. He said, "I didn't mean for it to go this far," his voice barely audible. Camilla said it was just to protect Mom's assets. She said the government would take everything if we didn't act fast. "Mr. Maddox," the judge said, looking directly at me, "did you or did you not make unauthorized withdrawals from your mother's accounts?" Yes, but it was for the trust, for her protection. Whose idea was it to transfer the house deed? Lucas looked at Camilla, then at me, then at his hands. "Camilla's, but I signed the papers." "Were you present when your mother supposedly signed these documents?" Long pause. Then, so quietly, the court reporter had to ask him to repeat it. "No." "Do you believe your mother actually signed them?" Another long pause. Then, so quietly, "No." Camilla's lawyer tried damage control, but it was too late. Lucas had confessed to conspiracy and fraud in open court. The judge's ruling was swift and comprehensive. All assets were to be immediately returned to me. The trust was dissolved. The deed was transferred back to my name. A protection order was issued preventing either Lucas or Camilla from accessing any of my legal, financial, or medical affairs. And criminal charges would proceed. "Mrs. Maddox," the judge said, looking directly at me, "I want you to know that what happened to you is unconscionable. No one should have to fight their own family to maintain their basic human dignity." After the hearing in the courthouse parking lot, Lucas approached me while Camilla was dealing with her lawyers. "Mom," he said, "I'm sorry. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I'm sorry." I looked at this middle-aged man who used to be my little boy and felt nothing
but sadness.
I know you are, Lucas. But sorry doesn't give me back the months of feeling like I was losing my mind. Sorry doesn't erase the humiliation of being evicted from my own home. I never wanted to hurt you, but you did. And the worst part is, you let her convince you I was the problem. Your own mother, Lucas. You threw away 41 years of love because a woman you'd known for 5 years told you to. He started to cry then, standing in that parking lot like a lost child. Can you forgive me? I considered the question seriously. Could I forgive him? Should I? I don't know, I said honestly. But I'm not going to spend what's left of my life hating you. That would just give her another victory. That was the last time we spoke for months. The criminal trial was a media sensation. Corporate strategist scams mother-in-law out of millions, made headlines from Houston to San Antonio. Camilla was eventually sentenced to 5 years in federal prison for elder abuse, fraud, and forgery. Lucas pled guilty to conspiracy and got 2 years probation plus restitution. His marriage didn't survive the scandal. But here's the thing about justice. It doesn't actually give you back what you lost. The house was mine again, legally, but it didn't feel like home anymore. Every room held memories of betrayal now. I'd walk through the kitchen where Camilla had hung her corporate guidelines and feel nauseated. I'd sit in the living room where she'd removed my curtains and feel like a stranger. 6 months after the trial, I made a decision that surprised everyone, including myself. I sold the house. $4.4 million, just like the appraisals had said. After paying Taryn and settling all the legal fees, I had enough money to do something I'd never imagined possible. I bought a small craftsman cottage near the bay, with windows that caught the morning light just right and room for a garden. Dean helped me fix it up, teaching me things about plumbing and electrical work that Victor never had. And then I did something that would have shocked the old Evelyn, the one who spent 40 years being a quiet seamstress and dutiful mother. I started the Victor Maddox Foundation for Displaced Senior Women. The foundation bought an old church that had been shuttered for years and converted it into transitional housing for elderly women who'd been victims of financial abuse. We provided legal aid, counseling, and most importantly, a place where women could rebuild their dignity. Here's what I learned that I want to share with all of you, especially if you're older or have aging parents. Comment below and tell me, do you think family obligation should ever override personal autonomy? Because the system failed me until I learned to fight for myself, and that's a lesson every senior citizen needs to hear. The foundation grew faster than I ever imagined. Stories like mine weren't rare, they were epidemic. Adult children stealing from parents, spouses manipulating elderly partners, caregivers taking advantage of vulnerability. But for every horror story, there was also a recovery story. Women who'd been written off as incompetent who turned out to be sharp as ever once they were away from their abusers. Victims who became advocates. Survivors who became thrivers. I found my purpose in their healing. About a year after the trial, I received an email from Camilla. She was in federal prison in Oklahoma, and somehow she'd gotten my address. Evelyn, it read, I hope we can revisit our arrangement when my situation changes. I believe there are opportunities for mutual benefit that we didn't fully explore before. I think you'll find my terms quite reasonable this time. I deleted it without responding. 2 weeks later, a letter arrived from Lucas. Handwritten, not typed. That was something, at least. Mom, it began. I know I don't have the right to ask for anything from you, but I keep thinking about those Saturday mornings when I was little, when you'd make cinnamon rolls during thunderstorms. I was scared of the thunder, but you'd wrap me in that old quilt and tell me stories until the storm passed. I remember feeling so safe, like nothing bad could ever happen as long as you were there. I threw that away. I threw you away, and I don't know how to live with that. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm not asking for another chance. I just wanted you to know that somewhere in the mess I became, that little boy still remembers. He still loves you, and he's sorry for what the grown-up version did.
Would you maybe meet me for coffee sometime? Just to talk. I understand if you can't. I understand if you won't. Your son, if you'll still have me, Lucas. I stared at that letter for a long time. The handwriting was the same as the thank you notes he used to write for birthday presents, careful and deliberate. The sentiment felt real in a way his courtroom apology hadn't. I called him 3 weeks later. We met at a coffee shop downtown, neutral territory that belonged to neither of us. He looked older than his 41 years, thinner, with lines around his eyes that hadn't been there before. "Thank you for coming," he said when I sat down across from him. I almost didn't. I know. We sat in awkward silence for a few minutes, sipping coffee that was too hot and avoiding eye contact. "Tell me about the foundation," he said finally. I was surprised he knew about it. "How did you—" "I read about it in the paper. The Victor Maddox Foundation. Dad would be proud." "Would he? I'm not so sure he'd be proud of how his son turned out." Lucas flinched like I'd slapped him. "No, he wouldn't." "Then why, Lucas? Help me understand. Were you always this person and I just didn't see it? Or did she change you into someone I don't recognize?" He was quiet for so long I thought he wasn't going to answer. "Both, maybe," he said finally. "You remember how I was in high school, always trying to impress the popular kids, always wanting to fit in with people who had more money, more status. You were a teenager. All teenagers want to fit in. But I never grew out of it. When I met Camilla, she was everything I thought I wanted. Sophisticated, successful, connected. She made me feel like I was somebody important. You were always somebody important. You were my son." But that felt small compared to what she offered. She talked about investment strategies and tax shelters and building generational wealth. She made our quiet life here seem provincial. Provincial. As if love and loyalty were somehow backward concepts. She saw the house and immediately understood what it was worth. Not what it meant to you, but what it was worth financially. And she convinced me that you were being irresponsible by not maximizing its potential. It was my house, Lucas. My choice what to do with it. I know that now. But then she made it sound like you were being selfish, like you were hoarding assets that could benefit the whole family. The whole family? You mean her? I couldn't see that then. She was so good at making her arguments sound reasonable, even generous. "We were protecting your future," she said. "We were securing your legacy." I thought about all the nights I'd lain awake in that motel room, wondering if I was losing my mind, wondering if maybe they were right. Maybe I was becoming incompetent. "Do you know what the worst part was?" I asked him. "What?" "The way you made me doubt myself. Every time I questioned something, you'd give me that look like I was being difficult, like I was the problem. Your own mother, Lucas. You gaslighted your own mother." He started crying then, right there in the coffee shop. Not the careful tears of manipulation, but the ugly,
honest sobs of genuine remorse. I know. I know, and I hate myself for it. I wanted to comfort him. 41 years of maternal instinct don't disappear overnight. But I also couldn't forget the months of systematic cruelty. "What happened to your marriage?" I asked him when he'd composed himself. "Over. She filed for divorce from prison. Apparently, I'm no longer useful to her now that the money's gone." "Do you miss her?"
He considered the question seriously. I miss who I thought she was, but I don't think that person ever existed. We talked for 2 hours. He told me about the therapy he'd started, the sponsor he'd found through a group for people who'd committed financial crimes. He was working as a night shift security guard, the only job he could get with a criminal record. "I know I can't fix what I did," he said as we prepared to leave, "but I want you to know I'm trying to become the kind of person Dad raised me to be." "Your father raised both of us," I said. I had to remember who I was, too. We didn't hug goodbye. We weren't there yet. Might never be there. But something had shifted, some small movement toward understanding, if not forgiveness. Walking back to my car, I thought about the letter he'd written, about those Saturday morning cinnamon rolls during thunderstorms. I could picture him so clearly, at 8 years old, wrapped in my grandmother's quilt, listening to me tell stories about brave knights and clever princesses while rain drummed on the windows. That night, in my new kitchen with its windows facing the bay, I made cinnamon rolls for the first time in 2 years. The smell filled the cottage, warm and sweet and familiar. I thought about Lucas, alone in whatever small apartment he could afford now. I thought about the women at the foundation, many of whom would never reconcile with the family members who'd betrayed them. I thought about forgiveness, and whether it was something you gave to others or something you gave to yourself. The timer went off, and I pulled perfect golden rolls from the oven. Steam rose from them like incense, carrying memories of Saturday mornings and thunderstorms, and a little boy who used to feel safe in his mother's arms. I packaged half of them in a box and wrote Lucas's address on the label. Not forgiveness, not yet, but remembrance. An acknowledgement that love and betrayal could exist in the same heart, that healing didn't require forgetting, and that sometimes the bravest thing you could do was remain open to the possibility of redemption. Here's my final question for all of you, and I really want to hear your thoughts. Is it possible to love someone and never trust them again? Because that's where I am with my son, and I'm not sure if that makes me wise or sad. Tell me in the comments what you think. Can family bonds survive complete betrayal? I dropped the package at the post office without a note. Let him make of it what he would. The foundation continued to grow. We helped over 200 women in our first 3 years, some of whom went on to become advocates and counselors themselves. The old church became a beacon of hope for people who thought their stories were over. I never moved back to the old house. The new owners, a young family with 3 children, sent me pictures sometimes. The kids had built a tree house in the oak tree Victor had planted for Lucas. Their laughter echoed across the water on summer evenings. It was good to know the house was full of joy again. Dean visited regularly, usually showing up unannounced with tools and a project he'd decided needed doing. We've rebuilt more than my cottage. We've rebuilt our relationship, stronger than it was before pride got in the way. "You know what I learned from all this?" he said one evening as we sat on my back porch watching the sunset paint the bay in shades of gold and crimson. "What's that?" "Family isn't about blood. It's about who shows up when things get hard." He was right. The women at the foundation had become my family. Taryn had become like a daughter. Dean had remembered how to be a brother. Even some of the younger volunteers called me Grandma Evelyn, and I wore the title proudly. Lucas sent Christmas cards now, always brief but heartfelt. He was working his way through college again, studying social work this time instead of IT. He wanted to help people, he said, make amends somehow. I never responded to the cards, but I kept them. On my 77th birthday, the foundation threw me a party in the old church sanctuary. The walls were decorated with photos of all the women we'd helped, all the lives we'd touched. There was cake and laughter and speeches about resilience and new beginnings. As I looked around that room full of survivors, women who'd been written off, discarded, erased, but who'd found their voices again, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Complete peace. I thought about the woman I'd been 3 years ago, cowering in a roadside motel, wondering if she was losing her mind. That woman would never have imagined this room, this community, this purpose. She would never have imagined that being knocked down could lead to standing taller than she'd ever stood before. That night I wrote in the journal I'd started, keeping it at Taryn's suggestion, a record of healing, she'd called it. Something to look back on when the hard days came. Today, I turned 77. 3 years ago, I thought my life was ending. My son and his wife had stolen everything I thought mattered. My home, my dignity, my sense of self. I felt erased, invisible, disposable. But they couldn't steal who I really was. They couldn't steal 41 years of Victor's love, or the strength he taught me, or the values we built together. They couldn't steal my capacity for growth, for learning, for becoming more than I'd ever been. Tonight, surrounded by my chosen family, I understand something fundamental. You cannot be erased unless you consent to your own erasure. And I never consented. Even in my darkest moments, even when I thought I was going crazy, some part of me kept fighting. Tomorrow, I start planning the foundation's expansion to Houston. More women need what we offer. More voices need to be heard. I am no longer a guest in my own life. I am the author of my own story, and this story is far from over. I set down my pen and looked out the window at the bay, where moonlight painted silver paths across the dark water. Somewhere out there, Victor's spirit was smiling. Somewhere out there, other women were fighting battles like the one I'd fought. And somewhere in this cottage by the sea, a 77-year-old woman who'd been counted out and written off was planning her next chapter. The water lapped gently against the shore, a rhythm as eternal as breath, as constant as hope, as infinite as the capacity of the human spirit to heal, to grow, and to begin again.